All right, so my name is Dhruv Anish, and today I have the privilege of being here with Barack Lesnar. Barack, it's so great to have you. Um, so how did you kind of first
Yeah,
get into comedy?
yeah. I feel like I was born a comedian. I arrived here a comedian, if I'm going to be honest with you. But there's this story my dad always tells me. I was born in New York, and the area we grew up, there was always flea markets going on, street vendors, people giving out, uh, you know, uh, giving out propaganda, giving out stuff for store sales, promotions, and I went up to one of these people that had a microphone in the middle of New York City, and I like demanded the microphone, and I started talking into the microphone, and I was like 4 or 5. And when I'm talking about in the middle of a Manhattan street on a Saturday, you're talking about people as far as the eye can see. So it's always been something that's appealing to me. It's always something I've been comfortable with. And as I've aged, I've looked for opportunities to just keep growing. A lot of things that I did, like I rapped when I was younger, I did poetry, uh, even internet trolling to a large degree. I was an internet troll ever since I was 14. All of those things kind of melded into the stuff I'm doing today, which is a good mix of improv comedy and stand-up comedy. Now that's my strong passion at the moment.
Yeah, so kind of when you were starting out, who were some of your comedic influences?
My top comedic influence by far was George Carlin. I'd say he's my favorite, but just the power he conveyed, how entertaining he was, the topics he discussed. Some of my favorite jokes ever come from him. One of my favorites is just think of how dumb the average person is, and 50% are dumber than that. He just had this righteous anger that I feel few people really capture. So he's a huge motivation to me. Dave Chappelle as someone who's not far behind for me. Just Chappelle Show to me was a cultural moment, not only for me, but people my age. I was in high school when that came out, and people would yell out quotes from that show. The Prince sketch, the Rick James sketch. This may be before your time, but it was not uncommon for people to go around yelling, "I'm Rick James, bitch." Um, but even aside from the power of Chappelle's Show, just his stand up, very similar to George Carlin and his ability to touch on political topics in such an entertaining, funny way. And his material, I know some people disagree with me here, but I feel like it ages really well. I glowed about him because those two really shaped who I am. And then some others, Lewis Black, was important to me. I really enjoyed Ron White, Mitch Hedberg. Um, Mitch Hedberg, really just the goofiness and the wit. He wasn't high energy, but still had a biting wit about him. So, a combination of all of those guys, I feel, have influenced who I am comedically.
And how would you kind of describe like your act? Like where are you finding most of your material from?
Uh, I think very similar to them. I just observe what happens around me in the world around me. And a lot of times it's things that I find amusing. It's things that I've made jokes about to my kids or to my partner or to my friends. Sometimes when you're scrolling through the internet and you read some clickbait and immediately your brain kind of forms an opinion because maybe the story seems so absurd. I've kind of learned that in that absurdity, that's where my bits live.
Gotcha. And how do you feel like your act has kind of evolved since you first started?
So I was heavily involved in improv before I transitioned into stand up. Uh, and in improv, a lot of it is character work. It's about having stage presence. It's about building as a team. And I carried a lot of those skills with me into stand up. With stand up, the things I've really improved on, I'd say it's word economy, understanding the structure of a joke, understanding why a joke works, understanding that there's a process, there's a refining process that you kind of have to go through, uh, a polishing process, and then eventually people see the polished material on stage and they're mesmerized. But there's a lot of work, a lot of energy that you need to put on your part to get there. So learning that just because I see someone on stage, maybe like Neff Johnson, a good friend of mine, or Jason Banks, uh, and they're so polished on stage, just knowing I can get there, but it's going to take a lot of work because they've done the reps, they've done the work to be where they are. But ultimately, my challenge is with myself, not with anyone else. It's a one-on-one race, as far as I'm concerned, and just trying to get the best that I can as quickly as I can.
Totally. And you're kind of you mentioned Johnson. You're kind of based in the Columbus area. So how
Hmm.
would you kind of describe the comedy scene in Columbus versus like other parts of the US?
Oh man, the Columbus scene is a diamond in the rough. I don't think people realize it's gold here. Um, People are always going to bring up Chicago. They're always going to bring up New York. They're always going to bring up LA. And now Austin, Texas is kind of on that Mount Rushmore of comedy hubs. But I think Columbus has the potential to be one of those cities. You can go and find sometimes 2 to 3 open mics in one night. You will see 30 to 40 comics at these open mics, and you'll see them at multiple open mics. You'll see genuine friendship, genuine camaraderie amongst these comics, like all grinding together. It's a beautiful thing to witness. Um, and there's a growing number of just opportunities. There's a club that opened last year called the Attic Comedy Club, and it's been huge for the comedy scene because now a lot of the local talent can expand outside of just the open mics. Now they're having opportunities to perform in front of large paying crowds. There's also venues that are giving opportunities for productions. I produce shows at a few venues in Columbus. So we have this situation where also Dave Chappelle opened a comedy club in Dayton, Ohio, and we're talking about an hour, 15 minutes from Columbus. So all of the ingredients are kind of in place for somebody to put a magnifying glass to Ohio and realize what's going on. Mark Norman tonight is going to be playing at the Attic Comedy Club. He's doing a pop up. Uh, and that's an experience I don't think you're going to get in a ton of cities like you can in Columbus. So Columbus is amazing. If you're into comedy, I highly suggest coming to Columbus. You can find me on IG at Barack Lesnar and hit me up and say, hey, I'm in town. Where are the open mics? I'm happy to direct you, let you know what you need to do. The opportunities are here. And like my friend Layla Ingalls pointed out to me when she was in Austin, there's so many people at a mic. There's no guarantee that you'll even get time. You don't really have that situation here. So you get the stage time you want, you get the development time you want, and you don't have the pressure of being in an LA or a New York or an Austin.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned that you like produce shows a lot, and I see that you produce and you host shows a lot. How do you kind
Mhm.
of find that your responsibilities change between like just performing and then producing?
I've found this like middle ground where I balance both and I love both. And it's kind of like what you're doing right now. You're producing this conversation. You had to make sure the Zoom was ready, you're recording it, you need to edit it. But at the same time, you also have to be the host. You have to ask me the questions. You have to understand the flow of the conversation and how the audience you're making this for is going to perceive it. So you are already doing the same thing I'm doing, but I just end up doing it at a larger scale. So it's a lot more pressure, but a lot of it is having trust and faith in the people that I'm putting in the positions I'm putting in, having people that can help me, delegating certain tasks, or I might have somebody that's helping me keep time. I might have the DJ there helping me keep time at a show. Um, just knowing what the structure is, and then changing hats when necessary. Now, when I'm up on the stage, I'm not worried about time. I'm not worried about the production aspects. When I'm up on that stage hosting, now I'm the host. And the moment I step off that stage and I bring up that next comic, now I can put that producer hat back on. It's a skill I don't think a lot of people can handle. And I think that's a lane that I like being in. And the lane is a lot of people that might out comic me, I feel won't outproduce me, and a lot of people who may be able to outproduce me won't out comic me. That's kind of the hybrid lane that I want for myself.
Totally. And speaking of kind of organizing on that big scale, I have to talk about how you organized the first ever Columbus Comedy Awards this past December. So how was that sort of experience for you, and how did you get the idea to do something like
Um, so to give credit where credit is due, the original idea came from Terrence the God Show. He gave the idea to Neff Johnson because Neff got a really nice venue for us, and we wanted to do a year-end celebration where we could come invite the entire comedy scene because last year was a very big year. You had the Attic Comedy Club opening up. You kind of had this bubbling of the scene. It got coverage by Columbus Underground. Shout out to Walker Evans, who has been great at highlighting what's happening in the Columbus comedy scene and getting eyeballs on it. Um, Dave Chappelle performing at the Attic Comedy Club 2 or 3 times kind of created this interest and this buzz in the comedy scene. So our goal was we had all this positive momentum. Let's celebrate the year with these comedy awards. Let's acknowledge the people that we see on a daily basis doing the work, these open mic hosts, the people producing shows around the city, oftentimes very thanklessly. Let's have how somebody described it. It's almost like an office function at the end of the year. It's just office awards, like the office episode. That's what it was. Um, and it was made with great intentions. But then when we first announced it, there was a lot of backlash, and I learned that people get really upset when the topic of awards come up, which is kind of funny because it's so meaningless. It's just it's not a real thing almost. It's like but it holds so much power, and it showed me a lot. Um, and at first, because of the backlash, I was a little hesitant. I thought to myself, Barack, you finally bit too much. Your ambition is getting the best of you. But then I reached a point where resentment started to hit me, and I felt like, yo, I know what I'm capable of doing. I know what this is, and I know what people are describing is not what this is. And then I became laser focused on making it an event that people would regret not being at, or make it an event that people would be very happy they attended. And thankfully, we were able to achieve the latter. It was a great show. We acknowledged so many people. I've had so many people in the scene come to me and tell me what you did is magnificent because you united the different parts of Columbus comedy. Because a lot of times the comedy scene in Columbus has been very segregated. There's a very strong black comedy scene. They produce shows for black audiences with a lot of black comics. And then you have a strong white base of comics with a strong white comic audience, but not a lot of intermixing between both. And I like to be a bridge between communities because I get along with all those communities. And then I brought all of those people into one room and acknowledge them as a comedy scene, not as black comedy, not as white comedy. And my goal with that is to make a stronger, more well-rounded, less fragmented scene. And so far, it seems like we really achieved that goal. So it went great. Stephen G and Misha and Slapstick Comedy were recognized for the best comedy podcast in the city. And that's because I've seen them go out of their way to give a microphone to younger comics to go there and interact with Stephen G. Stephen G could easily say, these guys are beneath me. I've interacted with mainstream comics. Misha could say, hey, I deal with Jason Banks. I deal with Kenny Mox. But no, they go out of their way to give an opportunity to up and coming talent. And that's what I want to acknowledge. Those are the people that I want to encourage to continue doing that because overall, it'll make a much stronger scene. And I still see it every time somebody posts a picture of their award or they're advertising their production as the award-winning production. I realized my goal was manifested in the sense that it gave that encouragement. That same way it upset people to not get recognized, being recognized gives people air under their wings, and that can take this scene to a whole new level.
Yeah, totally. And that's an awesome goal. And you kind of speak a little bit about encouraging like up and coming talent. Like what would you kind of say or like kind of give advice to like people that are starting out in stand-up?
Uh, be bold, but be patient. I've had a lot of success in the stand-up scene very quickly. And a lot of people that interact with me, they think, oh, he's done a lot really quickly. But what they don't see is all the grinding I had to do, years of doing improv, where it almost felt thankless and not much was coming out of it. I've had an improv team since 2019, produced shows since 2019 in Columbus, and I wasn't getting much traction until last year when I really started dabbling with stand up, and also when this improv production I was a part of started at the Attic called Black Friday. They won an award as well. So I had to learn to be patient. You're not going to pick up a microphone today and tomorrow be the person that you want to be. The other advice I would give is get over your fear of the stage. And the only way to get over that fear is to get on the stage, even if you wreck yourself. You need to learn that wrecking yourself is not the end of the world. You need to learn that eating shit is sometimes an important part of the process. You look like you're a good student. I'm assuming you've had a lot of good grades in your life, but I bet you probably learned more from that grade that you screwed up. It probably motivated you more. It made you feel disgusted with yourself if you care about that sort of thing. And it probably motivated you to prevent it from happening again. That's kind of the same thing with bombing on stage. If you don't bomb on stage, you can't really gauge where you're at. And sometimes having that feeling of ick is what helps you retool and figure out what you can change to be better. So I've been able to refine myself. And like yesterday, I got some validating feedback from a colleague of mine who last year gave me the advice about word economy, uh, which I know the viewers can't believe considering how much I've been talking. But with word economy, he told me yesterday that my set was really tight. So to come from someone whose feedback initially was word economy to telling me my set was tight, it kind of showed me that I have been working on those things and that it's being seen.
You kind of described kind of bombing is like an important part of the process. Do you have any particularly bad bombs that stand out in memory?
Uh yeah, there's a couple. So thankfully I'd say I have like an 85% batting average, thankfully. Like if I've been on the stage 85% of the time, it's gone at least decent. But there was one improv performance that we did as my improv team, the Illuminati. It was like October of 2021. It was right after the pandemic. We had just done a show September, and that show went great. But this next show, I don't know. I don't know what it was. Like it was terrible. The audience wasn't reacting. The start that we chose bombed. We had a start where somebody would in the audience would give us their cell phone and we'd read their text messages, but for 5 minutes we couldn't get a volunteer. So there was like this weird lull period, and this is how you get started. And I felt like that terrible start carried over. We had somebody on the team at a time, a guy that I love, great guy, but he committed a cardinal sin of improv, and he did a no instead of a yes. And I think I was like, oh, you're my father. And then he's like, no, I'm your husband. And then that frustrated me and like just threw me off. And I remember just leaving after that performance, leaving early, not saying bye, just going home in disgust. And for a while, strongly considered being like, you know what, I'm done with improv. I'm done with this team. And my friend Karen actually had to walk me off the ledge months later and kind of tell me like, hey, you have this team, you have to focus. And I'd say a year later, like it's taken off. Now we have Hot Fuzz Comedy. The Illuminati is a staple of that comedy series. We've sold all of those out. There's a few other comedy series that I'm going to start as well. Um, but that bomb, even though it almost made me want to quit, when I had the courage to come back, it put me on a whole new trajectory. Sometimes, even with stocks, you see it. Sometimes a stock takes off the hardest when it's done crashing to its lowest point, and then it takes off. I'm sure you Bitcoin aficionados listening to this can confirm that.
Totally. And you mentioned them before, Neff Johnson, Layla Ingalls. You're actually doing a podcast now as a part of Slapstick, that we're producing, that's coming out soon. So how would you kind of describe the upcoming show? How's that experience been like?
Oh man, I'm so excited for Disco Fifi is the name of the podcast. It's going to be amazing because I have genuine friendships with both Layla and Neff. So that means there's natural chemistry there, but we're also, Neff and I are very similar in a lot of ways, and then Layla and I are similar in a lot of ways. And I feel like I'm a good bridge between like Layla and Neff as far as conversation. Um, Layla has built a huge audience, but when I first met Layla, she was newer, just like me in stand up. Uh, they didn't have a huge audience yet, but I immediately saw how funny she was, and I saw how hard she worked and the talent that she possessed. And I would tell her all the time, I'm like, yo, you have the most star power out of any comic in Columbus right now. And I would always tell her that. And then she went on Kill Tony, and now she has like 40,000 followers on IG. Everyone that sees her loves her. She's booked everywhere. Um, so to see her growth makes me so happy for her. And, combined with my own growth, and then Neth, who's been grinding for years and finally, opened for Dave Chappelle, has kind of become the face of the Attic Comedy Club. He's somebody again who wanted to do these comedy awards for the good of the scene, and he gave up being recognized. I don't know if people know this, but Neff got as many votes as almost anyone for top comic in the city, and he chose not to take that honor. I didn't take any honors either because it was about something bigger than us. So this podcast is for us to discuss what's on our mind, to discuss current events, to create content that's entertaining for us to make, because we have Neff and I are very similarly minded in a lot of ways, but we also have very different aesthetics and approaches that also go really well together. So I'm excited for that podcast. If you get the chance, you should definitely check it out. We should have the first episode coming. I know a live stream, but we should have the first episode coming out here soon.
Awesome. And kind of as like a looking forward, I know the year just started. What are kind of some career goals that you hope to accomplish in 2020?
All right, so man, there's a lot of goals that I have. So just continuing my productions that I'm doing and continue to be able to scale them to where I'm selling out 100, 150 in a production. Right now I'm in the 60, 80 range where I could comfortably get that number of people. I want to scale where I can increase that number. I want to increase my presence in Cincinnati, in Cleveland, in Dayton. Um, Last week it came out Zillow, three of the top 10 housing markets in the country are Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. So that to me tells me there's a huge opportunity for someone to build in those areas that are literally in proximity to each other. And they all have comedy scenes that are not connected, but again, serving as that bridge and seeing what can come of that, producing in those different cities. There's a comedy festival that's being produced by Columbus Underground next August here in Columbus. I'm going to be helping with that. There's going to be a lot of national headliners, so I'll have the opportunity to network with a lot of national headliners and expand my network from a local comic network to a more national network, and hopefully just get access to bigger venues, bigger stages, continue networking with great people. I love meeting people and producing the show with them, because it's a great way to get close with someone and like create something together, and it's just fun. So Thursdays with Neff Johnson continue to help grow that, where we can sell it out, on a weekly basis. He has a show there every Thursday at the Attic at 8 p.m. So helping produce that. There's a docu series that we're working on. That's a real close passion project of Neff's, and I've been helping him with that. And I think that's gonna be a really dope project. It's like a mix of Louis, combined with some like The Office, maybe a little Seinfeld. It's like a mix of those things. And I think people are going to be excited when it comes out.
Totally. And this is sort of last question here, a little bit off topic, but I saw that you produce a lot of NBA fantasy basketball content. So I got to ask you, how did your love for basketball originate, and what are some keys to a successful fantasy team?
Oh man. Oh, you caught me off guard. Yeah, so yeah, I love fantasy basketball. I'm actually known in the fantasy basketball community for my fantasy basketball advice. I've been making videos since 2018. I have been playing fantasy basketball since 2007, and I give it a lot of credit for the confidence I have today. Because when I first started, I was a broke college kid, didn't have much going for me, but I got really good at analyzing player trends, building teams, and eventually I was like in the 1 percentile on Yahoo Fantasy Basketball back in 2011, and I've been in the 1 percentile for the next 12 years. And what I love about it is I love the NBA since as a kid. I grew up in New York watching Michael Jordan and the Bulls dominate. It was like watching the superhero. I've always grown up in black and brown communities where basketball is really prevalent and just part of the culture. So I have like almost a cultural love of the NBA. Uh, and I'm not skilled enough to be a great basketball player, so I chose to be good at fantasy basketball. And the same skills I use in fantasy basketball, I honestly use when I produce my shows or when I identify talent. I made the joke, I feel like I picked Layla up off the waiver wire because she didn't have the notoriety, but now she's putting numbers up. And I have her on all my productions because she produces numbers. Uh, and it's you take chances on people, you see their potential, and you gamble on them. You invest in them when maybe the numbers don't justify it at the moment, but then when the numbers do justify it, you have a great asset at your disposal, for a lot cheaper than it would have been. Now I'm sure she's still really accessible. But if she blows up and goes to Hollywood, she's promised me that she won't forget about me. So we'll see how that goes.
Who would you say your NBA player comparison is?
My NBA player comparison. Ooh, that's a good question. Uh I like I like Draymond Green. I like Draymond Green because I think Draymond Green's incredibly underrated. I know he's not the most popular player, but I remember when the Warriors were struggling to win and they started Draymond Green over David Lee, and all of a sudden the Warriors became a dynasty. And what Draymond Green did is he helped make the game easier for everybody else. He would pass to Curry, he would pass to Clay, he would play center, he would be their big man. Um, and they were able to play really fast because he was kind of that glue player that made everybody else around better. He was never the most talented guy on the team. He was never the best shooter. He was the best defender, but I like Draymond Green because to be the person I want to be, I want to help other stars shine, and then they'll help me shine. Versus, like, oh, well, I hate that Steph Curry's such a better shooter than me, so I'm not gonna pass him the ball and make him look bad. That there's a lot of funny acting stuff like that in comedy, and in life and anything, and I want to see less of that. So I'd say Draymond Green, humbly.
I
Just
love that comparison, especially as a Bay Area native.
oh yeah, I know you like that one then for
Yeah,
sure.
totally. Yeah, so you can catch Barack hosting the Hot Fuss Comedy Showcase in Columbus, Ohio on February 24th. And follow him on Instagram at Barack Lesnar, all one word. Barack, thank you so much for talking with me today, and I wish you nothing but
Appreciate you.